Hi, this is Lou Covey, and actually, you're looking at Joe Basquez. I'm Lou Covey, and this is Joe Basquez, my buddy and partner in crime at Footwasher Media, and we've got an interesting story today. This is our first Google Hangout, and the title is "The Trouble with Trade Shows."
All right, Lou. So I saw your post on the Common Basics blog. You've had some epiphany about trade shows. What's the big problem with trade shows?
Well, here's the thing. I went to the Design Automation Conference this week, and I only spent one day there, which is usually I spend maybe 2, 3 days at this, and it's painful because the Design Automation Conference is the epitome of what's wrong with trade shows altogether. And the basic here's what happened. I went walking down the show floor, and I got accosted by a half a dozen booth workers who were salesmen, marketing people, and I'm not counting the booth babes that were scanning badges. And they came up to me, they took a look at my badge and see that I'm a journalist and said, "Hey, you want to do a story about us?" And I said, "Okay, I'll bite. Why?" And that statement just completely flummoxed them, because usually what they're asked is, what do you do? What are you announcing? The what question. But I essentially approached them and said, why do you exist? And none of them had an answer. And that in itself is the major problem with trade shows. It's not, and there's nothing wrong with the Design Automation Conference as an event itself. It's an important industry. We cannot have all of the electronics we have without the design automation industry. And they do some amazing things. But the problem is they've lost the understanding about why they actually exist. They're there to make money. And they don't understand that they're really there to solve a problem. And the primary comment that I was getting from all of the exhibitors there is, there are no customers here. We're talking to we have no customer meetings. And if there is a customer that came by, they couldn't gather their interest. And this was about 40 companies that I talked to.
Why do you suspect there's no customers there? Because what I've always heard, we do a lot of trade shows every year, right? And one of the big things that we've heard in the last few years is, there may not be a lot of traffic, but trade shows are still a great place to meet with customers because you don't have to fly to individual locations. So you just bring them. They're all going to be at the trade show anyway, so you meet them there. So why do you think they weren't there?
Well, that's the interesting thing, because we do run across customers on a regular basis, and they are frustrated with the industry because their statement is, we can't really figure out if they're listening to us. And the customers have a hard time even expressing what their problem is. They know they have a problem. They know they need these tools, but they have no idea if those tools will actually solve their problem. And the customer and the providers of the tools are just trying to sell the customer on using their tool without really understanding the problem. And that's where it comes down to. No one has a story anymore. And it's not the problem with the Design Automation Conference as a show or any other trade show. It's because there's no narrative. The content is all duplicates of everyone else. Give you an example. There was one video that I actually stopped and looked at of one of the customers. Okay, they took a customer a video and they put it up on their site, and they had a vice president talking about their latest technology. But they opened it up. It was a 5-minute video, and they did 2.5 minutes on this. Hi, I'm Joe Blow from X Semiconductors, and we are one of the leading providers of components for wearable devices. And we did some market research, and we found that our customers are looking for components that use very little power, that are programmable, and that fit a small footprint. And I sat, yeah, I mean, I sat there aghast.
I laugh at that because if you're talking about wearables, no duh, right? I mean, that's
Yeah,
what everyone's looking for. I mean, you got to have all those things to be in something wearable.
yeah, exactly. And, and that's the problem is that the stories that are being told at the Design Automation Conference are the same stories they were telling in 1990. They're talking about the same problems. They may say we've made some advancements, but the reality is that they haven't. They're still dealing with the same problems, and the problems are getting bigger. They're outpacing them, which is the basic problem that needs to be discussed, that the customers are having. And that's not a problem with the event. That's a problem with the participation, with the participants. And I sat down with the CEO of a major media house just before I went in. And he was the one that got me kind of looking around at these ideas, because he went to the show just before me and said it was a ghost town. And this was supposed to be on the first day of the show. It was an absolute ghost town. And when I got there, it wasn't wrong. And what he said is that the basic problem that he's discovered is that the companies have a particular, the vendors have a particular story they want to tell. And his journalists have another story that they want to tell. But it seems that there's an entirely different story that the customers want to tell themselves and then hear back from the media and from the vendors that they understand that problem. There needs to be this conversation, and that's not what's happening.
So let's be clear. I mean, you talked a lot about the Design Automation Conference because that's the one you went to. But one of the things that I was thinking as you were talking is, do you think this is a trade show problem in general? Do you think this is an electronics trade show problem? Do you think this is a DAC problem? Because I can think of several trade shows that still get a lot of buzz or still a lot of story. I mean, CES, right? I live in Austin, South by Southwest, right? I mean, are you lumping all of them together, or is there something specific?
Yeah, and I think that's the issue. It's not necessarily, it's not a problem with the Design Automation Conference, although because of the size and the fact that the attendance is either flat or dropping, and that's another interesting story to talk about, because usually by Friday after the end of DAC, they're crowing about a 5% increase year to year, and there's been nothing that's come out. So it's going to be interesting to see what they say next week. But what I'm hearing is the same problem in every trade show, and this is going back to this CEO of a media house who said he went to South by Southwest. It's an interesting thing you bring this up. And he went to an exhibit and had no idea who the company was that was putting on the exhibit. Essentially what they were doing, they put up this big wall and gave people spray cans and said, write what you're trying to accomplish, okay, as graffiti, and they were just writing it on the wall. And Paul went up to one of the booth leaders and said, who are you guys? He says, we're Microsoft. They had no identification as to what company they were. What they were doing there at South by Southwest was gathering information from their customer base about what they wanted. Okay, and that's what they invested in. And he says, well, he asked them, what's the ROI you want to get out of this? And they say, the ROI isn't important. Finding out what our customers want is important. And they're willing to spend money to find out what their customers want, because Microsoft is in a really weird situation right now. They have found themselves in the past 10 years to become the underdog, and they don't know how to deal with it. They have to learn how to deal with being the underdog, and they can't continue doing things the way they always have. So this is a way for them to gather information. That's what the value of trade shows are today, is a way to gather information from your customers, not to sell your products. So you've got to set up your content base to gather that kind of engagement from people, and that's what people are not doing.
I think there's two interesting things you just said there, and the first one is the content. The content's got to be set up prior to the show, because your customers have to be there in order for you to gather that information. And what you were saying is that at DAC, they weren't there. So you've got to do those things ahead of time. I think the other interesting thing is, as far as ROI goes, it's pretty easy to see. You get ideas for products when you look at what challenges they're facing. You get ideas for your product roadmap on things you already have, right? So it's not you can create those products and sell them, and that's your ROI. They are sometimes down the road.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's an exact problem that there has to be a basic change in how people actually look at what the ROI is. Because when you're in an industry where your revenues are flat, your growth is flat, people are excited now about a 2% growth year to year. Where it used to be, if you didn't have 10% growth, you were dead. And I'll tell you something about DAC. They've been excited about 11 to 15% growth every year, and they fudged the numbers to figure that out. They're not going to have that this year, and they're in a trade show that is in their backyard. I mean, every year that they've had this thing in San Francisco, they've taken up at least 2 halls in Moscone. Well, they couldn't do that this year for 2 reasons. Number one, they ran it on the same week that the Apple World Developer Conference was, and Apple was taking up all of Moscone West. Okay, but on the other side of it is that they didn't have enough exhibitors to fill 2 exhibit halls. In fact, what they had this year barely filled up Moscone South. There were huge areas of space where you could have gone bowling with barbells, and it wouldn't have hit anybody. So,
I mean, speaking specifically about DAC, it sounds like it's a big problem. What's the solution?
Solution is becoming a content-based organization. Really wanting to find out what's going on. We're talking to lots of customers. You know this, Joe. We're talking to lots of companies that are saying, we've got to figure out a way to build community. And these companies have been investing millions of dollars into the infrastructure for a community, but they haven't given a single thought to the content. And now they're finding out they're getting the same reactions to their online communities that they're getting to their trade shows. Nobody's showing up except for their own salespeople. And that's a problem with content. So they have to start fundamentally changing how they tell their story. Okay? It's what we've been telling companies for a long time. What you make is no longer important, because what you make is not solving the problems of your customers. Your customers have to kludge your technology to other technologies to maybe have a partial solution to their problem. And you don't know what their problem is. So it's time for you to learn what that problem is. And you're going to have to do that by asking questions.
That's the interesting thing that's going on right now, is there's so many ways for people to get information, that there's so much innovation going on. You might have a product that somebody else comes up with a completely different way to use on a completely different product, something you never thought of. And if you're not listening to them, if you're not communicating with them, you can miss a huge opportunity.
Yeah. I actually had an example of that going back several years. I was at a trade show with a company that we were doing PR for, and this is one of the reasons I didn't want to do PR anymore. They made a semiconductor, an audio semiconductor, and they were coming out with a new product. It wasn't really an earth-shaking product, but it was a pretty good audio device. And they went to Comdex when it was still alive, and had a booth there. And at the time, they were a major supplier of audio semiconductors to Apple for the iPod. Okay, that's what made them the big deal, because they were providing these things for Apple when the iPod first came out. Well, we had been pushing them for a long time to get into a dialogue with Apple, and not on a public basis, but just within their publications, their internal publications, to get information out within the Apple community. And they said, no, we have a great relationship with Apple. We're just going to do it this way. Well, we're sitting there in Comdex, and there is this display for this new product, and these 2 guys come up, and they've got Apple on their badges. And they're taking a look at this, and they asked some questions, and their response was, gee, I wish we knew about this product 6 months ago, because we really could have used it for this new product we're coming out with. and they didn't get designed in. And
So
6 months
even
later,
inside a company you're already in, you still can miss things.
right. And that's the issue, is that 1 year later, the product that came out was the iPhone. And that company, which was publicly traded, dropped 75% of their stock option or their stock value because they lost the Apple contract. So that's the example. And we're at 15 minutes, which is too long. So I think we're going to have to wrap this one up. You got any other questions?
No, I think that's it. I think this was good. I can't wait to do another one.
Okay. So everyone, thanks for joining us for our first Google Hangout, and look forward to seeing you again sometime. Thanks.